This is Sister Juana Johnson, and this is my summary of our class projects in the studies in the Gospel of John. First, I'd like to say this has been the most impactful class I've ever taken to date. Now, those of you who know me, please disregard the fact that I say this about all of my classes, because undoubtedly, whatever book I'm currently studying becomes my favorite book of the Bible. John, the beloved disciple, has truly allowed me to see Jesus in a fresh new way, and I'd like to thank Brother Brickle, who is our class guru, for being our esteemed professor and guru of the Gospel of John. Please forgive me, Brother Brickle, I just couldn't resist. Our assignments this semester have forced us to look at 3 different views of John. We viewed and critiqued the movie. We listened to lectures and developed our own lesson plans, and we read the commentary by Joanne Brandt. First, for a brief review of the film. The film, The Gospel of John, is a compelling depiction of Jesus sent from heaven as the Word of God made flesh who dwelt among us. It captures verbatim the entire Gospel as it was written by John in the Good News translation. Seeing this Gospel brought to life gives the viewer not only John's unique perspective of the gospel story, but the realism that can be difficult to read but easily seen. The cast of characters was painstakingly selected to be authentic representations of the people who would have walked and talked with Jesus, who reverenced God. And this is what Philip Seville said. To accomplish this, Seville looked for someone who would be able to experience the Jewishness of a person born in that time. He selected a very normal-looking person in Henry Ian Cusack. One not overly handsome, but he was nice-looking. He was not especially tall, nor did he stand out from the other characters. He looked like the nice, normal guy, one that any of us would like to hang out with. Unassuming, non-judgmental, with a good sense of humor. The viewer is immediately drawn to Jesus because his face is kind, his eyes are welcoming, his demeanor is friendly, and he smiles. Beyond the character of Jesus, the most prominent other figure, in my opinion, in the film was the actor that played the unnamed leading Pharisee, Richard Linton. In fact, Linton had second billing on the credits. His presence in the scene brought with it darkness. It was the darkness of the unbelieving religious authorities. His hair was very black. His clothing and head coverings were black. His eyebrows and even his eyes seemed unusually dark to me, depicting the darkness of his heart. This Pharisee portrayed an excellent example of men who did not want the truth and apparently did not know the truth and spent all of their waking hours trying to turn the truth into a lie. The director of photography, Miroslav Bezak, filmed each scene with a deliberate quality that spoke volumes. For example, oftentimes while teaching Jesus, he would speak softly and very directly at the Pharisees. This kind of drama cannot be seen when we read the Bible in the written word, but added volumes to our understanding of the dynamics that went on between the Pharisees and Jesus in the film. Bezak paid close attention to how each scene would be framed. For example, he said he had to orchestrate the scenes carefully so that all 12 disciples would fit into the frame in some of the scenes. He acknowledged that the Bible has a lot of iconography that is in people's minds, so he filmed so it would have a timeless quality. Another brilliant move is how he filmed the miracles. He said that what was important about the miracles was not the hocus pocus of a miracle, and so he did not use special effects, but it was how the people responded to the miracle. So he concentrated on showing the people's faces after a miracle without using special effects. One of the most notable photography techniques used early in the film was the absence of a direct view of Jesus as the narrator, and John the Baptist describes the one among you whom you do not know from John 1:26. Just as Jesus is not named in the Bible until John 1:29, so we do not immediately see Jesus' face in the film, only his shadow and his feet. That technique immediately builds suspense and anticipation. Without a doubt, this film made an indelible imprint on me. Whenever I read the Gospel of John, it will now be accompanied with a visual of each scene. This was so unexpected because every Bible movie I've ever seen in the past has always taken poetic license to enhance the scenes with words and deeds just for the thrill of the audience. This film did not. It was almost perfect. And if I had the skill and resources to produce such a film, I would do it exactly like it was done, with one exception, and this is probably because of my apostolic Pentecostal background. I would not have Mary Magdalene wearing red lipstick in the final scene or in any of the scenes. The attention to detail in every aspect of this movie, from the set design to costumes to music, makes it an outstanding production. In the special effects section of the DVD, every category was expounded upon to show the enormous combined effort to capture, in a real sense, the story and age of the Gospel of John. From the costume designer, who went out of her way to use authentic, real fabric, or not synthetic fabric. She said using synthetic fabric would allow the audience not to believe the story. But she used fabric and dye colors that would have been used back in the day of this gospel. The music director went to the trouble of finding old instruments from antiquity that music would have really been played on. And all of this added a wonderful sense of collaboration of their talents to give us an authentic film. The next part of our class projects was the 6-week lesson plan. I have to admit, I didn't know what I was doing in this one. But as I was preparing and trying to do the project, a light bulb came on, and I looked back through my notes to try to see how Dr. Brickle's methodology fit for his lessons. Of course, no one can be as precise as Brother Brickle, but the problem I had was fitting 21 chapters into 6 weeks. He had a whole semester. I searched a number of different books on John and settled on a combination of favorite divisions that best appealed to me and to the students that I would be teaching this class to. Of course, this slide depicts not only the multiple use of sources, but also the mark of a good teacher to have a recommended book list. You all know where that idea comes from. The divisions I settled on for my lesson plan included John 1 through 51, which would be I would do an introduction in my class of John in general, with all of its nuances and differences between the Synoptic Gospels and John, and then the prologue. My second lesson would have covered John 2:1 through 4:51, from Cana to Cana, where Jesus's ministry began with the wedding feast in Cana and ended with the healing of the nobleman's son back in Cana again. Lesson 3, his public ministry, John 5 through 12:50, I would do. And lesson 4, the farewell discourse, where he's teaching his disciples, John 13:1 through 17:26. Lesson 5, the Passion of the Christ, 18:1 through 19:42. And then lesson 6 would be the final resurrection and epilogue, 21 through 20:25. I found it a little bit difficult because I'm probably not nearly as creative as Brother Brickle in naming or capturing our attention, but I had a little fun with it. In the first section, I did where did this stuff come from? And I selected this opening because, according to William Barclay, John has the most penetrating gaze of all the New Testament writers into the eternal mysteries and the eternal truths and the very mind of God. My second session, my draw was, are we going in circles? And of course, that's from the Cana to Cana scene. The next section, I wrote the law, I broke the law, the man who is equal with God. And this public ministry of Jesus capsulates a lot of his encounters with the Pharisees, who were constantly challenging him about performing miracles on the Sabbath and making himself equal to God. And of course, raising of Lazarus was the impetus for their plot to go ahead and try to kill this man who was turning the world upside down. Jesus, the light of the world, goes private. Of course, this is when he goes into his private ministry with just his disciples. And then is this how it all ends or just the beginning? Is the crucifixion. And I got that thought from trying to imagine what the disciples must have been thinking when Jesus was arrested and condemned to be crucified. And then the who will roll the stone away was something I got from my own pastor, Bishop Johnson, years ago about Mary and being worried about who would roll the stone away. And he would use that for me when I was worried about things without realizing God would have already taken care of it. When she got there, the stone was already rolled away. So I used a variety of resources to compose the content of the outline that I turned in for my 6-week lesson plan. And finally, we have to comment on or summarize our encounter with Brant. And I would have to say that I haven't yet written the paper on the review of her, which I'm sure most of us haven't done, but I put this quote from Alan Culpepper, who said, Brant skillfully mines the Greco-Roman literary, rhetorical, and social world of the fourth gospel and writes with brevity that moves the reader briskly along from one fresh insight to the next. The result is a wonderfully formative experience. And I got this quote from the back of the book. Nevertheless, here are some of my preliminary thoughts. Initially, I thought Brant was a bit difficult to read, but as I acclimated to her style, it became easier. And at times, I felt like I was in kind of an information overload. She offers so much information verse by verse that it was almost a distraction. And I had to keep reminding myself, but I'm not reading the Bible, I'm reading commentary. Brant painstakingly covers every detail. She introduces the reader to major figures and social issues of the Greco-Roman world that shaped this gospel. And I could see much value in using her commentary, perhaps when concentrating on a particular verse or a particular passage of scripture in the book of John, because she's obviously done extensive work on this gospel. One area I really enjoyed were the theological issues she discussed at the end of each section. Often these gave extended insight into scholarly thoughts and sometimes disputes in interpretation. I think her book is a must-have in our library of resources on the book of John. In closing, I will quote none other than our great professor, Brother Brickle, because I don't know of anyone better to quote when it comes to the Gospel of John. And Brother Brickle said, I believe on the first day of class, when he was beginning his lecture and introducing us to the book, he said, John is a never-ending source of delight, but you must pay attention to the details. And in closing, I would like to say I think Philip Seville, the director of the movie, and Joanne Brant did just that. They paid attention to the details of this wonderful, marvelous Gospel of John. So with that, I say thank you for listening to my fellow classmates. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. I hope you really enjoy the break as I plan to do. The end.